Let's make it quick 20. 2 hours.
Okay, well, we'll do chapters 13 and 14 tonight. Looking at a passage from Luke, and then getting back to Paul. The thing to know about Luke, of course, he is our only, I guess you'd say, Greek author that we know of. He was a native Greek speaker. He's a Gentile. Other than the book of Job, every other book of the Bible is written by a Jew, an Israelite. Luke is the exception, and his writings were accepted, of course, because of his association with Paul. There's never been any question as to the authenticity or the inspiration of his gospel or the book of Acts. But one of the characteristics is because he is an educated Greek, to be a doctor, he would have been that. In their culture, most likely at some point or another, he would have been a slave, most likely, because usually doctors were slaves. They were, again, highly educated, but that was the way it was done. But it's very likely that at this point in his life he had been freed. He served as Paul's physician. And as we know, Paul had a thorn in the flesh that God chose not to heal, and must have had other medical needs that Luke would have taken care of. So one thing we know is that Luke did not have the gift of healing, even though he was a healer in a sense. He used medicine. But he has, because of his education level and all that, his Greek is much better. It's the closest to classical Greek we have in the New Testament. And he does things similarly to Peter. He likes to put things between the article and the noun, or the preposition and its noun. He likes infinitive constructions and those kinds of things. So it's more difficult in that sense, but also much smoother Greek. If you were to compare grade levels, if you want to call it that, whereas Paul, let's say, is a 9th grade writing level, Luke would be a college level. He would not be the classical graduate level. He wouldn't be way up there, but he'd be 12th grade, first year college, something like that. It's more difficult to that degree, but still not like the true classical Greeks. It's still Koine Greek. And if you didn't know, during the first century, both BC and AD, you had Koine Greek, which was the common business language, and then you had the classical Greek. It's very similar to what we have now. Right now we have newspaper English, which is 6th grade reading level. A lot of things are written at that level for general consumption. But then within specific fields, they write at a graduate level. So the typical theology book is not written at 6th grade reading level. It's written at a graduate level. That's why the sentences are more complex, the words used are more complex, and there's a distinct style. And in every discipline you have these different styles of writing that reflect that discipline. Same sort of thing. So the New Testament was written in Koine Greek because it was written for the common person. And even Luke's would still fit into the Koine category rather than what we call the classical Greek category. Even though it's better Greek than the typical Koine, it's still Koine. And this Koine Greek actually was a language spoken and written only for a couple of 300 years. It was actually in transition even during New Testament times. Certain words were falling out of use, other words were coming into use. The prepositions that you're learning, some of them were disappearing from the language at this time and being replaced by others. That's why they have such a wide range of meanings, even in and of themselves, because certain prepositions had already dropped out. A good example of the shift in the language that was occurring is the use of agapao, for love. Actually, at this time and prior to this time, the common word for love was phileo. But what was happening in the language at this time is phileo had begun to be used for kissing. And because it had taken on the connotation of to kiss rather than to love, the language was substituting, and not just in the Bible, But in other literature, agapao was beginning to be used in place of phileo to distinguish between kissing someone and loving them. And the distinction of agapao being this committed, non-emotional love, and phileo being a friendship love, that was used at times, but is not always the case. And it's just as Christ's love for us is sometimes described as agapao, sometimes described as phileo. Christ's love for the Father is sometimes agapao, sometimes phileo. The Father's love for Christ is sometimes agapao, sometimes phileo. His love for us is sometimes agapao, sometimes phileo. And sometimes in certain places they're used interchangeably, just so the reading's not boring. So it's not the unique meaning that is often given, because the word's meaning was changing at that time. A couple of hundred years later, you don't find phileo being used for love at all. You find agapao. It had replaced it. Now the New Testament writers were actually one step ahead. The change had just begun, and they switched over to agapao dominantly. It was not as commonly used at that time. And so it's, you could say either they had foresight or God in inspiration gave them foresight to make that shift, because then it was much more applicable in the years to come and understandable. Much like trying to read King James charity and understanding it to mean love now. It's more difficult.
Was phileo overtaking eros then? Or was that different still?
No, it wasn't. Yeah, eros I think was still being used for the emotional infatuation kind of love, not erotic love like we think of, but more what we think of as infatuation and that little, the bubbly when I first fall in love kind of love. The emotional high. And of course, storge was the motherly love, the love towards a child, which doesn't occur in the New Testament, but was a common term in those times. So, when we translate Luke, it is more difficult. Luke's choice of vocabulary is very different from the others, which is why to really be able to read Luke and Acts with any kind of speed at all, you need to be able to push your vocabulary below the 30 words or more threshold, down to about the 20 words or more threshold. When you hit 20 words or more, and you've got all those memorized, Luke and Acts become much more accessible, because you're not looking up every other word. But up until then, it's slow translating. And so don't feel bad about that. That's just the nature of the beast, because he has a much broader vocabulary than the other guys do. And most of our vocabulary is built off of Paul because he wrote more. It's just like when you get to Jude, you got a whole bunch of hapax legomenos, which is, the word only occurs once, because Jude only wrote that one little short thing, and he had his own vocabulary. So when you go to translate Jude, you just go ahead and open up the dictionary. Because about half the words you ain't seen before and you won't see again. Well, let's go ahead and translate, and I guess we'll start here on the left tonight. You can do 26.
Want me to...
Go ahead and sound out the first time through, yeah.
Kai hos apagonon, auton, epilabomenoi, Simone, Tine, or Tina, Hure Neon, Ercomenon, Agru, Epithecon, Auto, Ton, Stauron, Phalan, Ophispin, to Jesu. And as they led him away, they took hold of Simon, and I didn't quite know how to translate that. Tina.
A certain one from.
Okay.
That's how I did it.
Okay.
Simon, a certain guy from Cyrene. Or you might even go with who was from Cyrene if you wanted to smooth it out.
Coming from the field and placed on him the cross to carry from behind Jesus.
Good. Very good. Notice the use of the infinitive here, to bear. And to carry then has the helping word apisthen, meaning from behind, or carry behind. Good.
And a large number of people and women.
No, go ahead and sound
sorry.
that first.
E kaluthe de auto palu plethos to lau kai nikon kai ekaptanta kai ithrinun autom.
Good.
That first word looks to me like a
Yeah.
word singular.
Uh-huh.
I didn't really know how to parse it though, because it has the augment on the front, but it looks like a present ending.
Okay.
So I didn't know what to do with that.
It has an augment on the front, that's good. And that makes it either,
Imperfect or aorist?
it makes it either imperfect or
Second
second aorist. And so it would be an imperfect, and they were following him.
Okay. But it's third singular, isn't it?
Yeah, it's third singular.
There was following him with equals.
Yeah, see, the multitude, the plethos, polyplethos, to lau, plethos, even though it's a multitude, it's in the singular.
Okay.
So that's why that is a third singular. Now, y'all notice that. We always think of multitudes and crowns in the plural. And we have a tendency to say they. But in Greek, a multitude is viewed as a singular unit, so it'll be singular, therefore the verb connected to it, if it's the subject, will still be singular. Even though but we would then translate it what we would think conceptually in English.
Okay. So a large number of people were following him, and also women who were beating their breasts and lamenting.
Yes, good.
What is that? That high there? Alpha Yoda with the...
Alpha Yoda with the rough breathing mark is a pronoun. Pronoun.
So that'd be who or...
Yes, it is the, well, let's go ahead and parse this or conjugate it.
Nominative.
Nominative, plural, feminine pronoun. And so we have a relative pronoun, so this is a relative clause being used to describe gunekum, the women.
How many different kinds of pronouns are there?
Well, let's see, there's the relative pronouns, there's regular pronouns, I guess you'd call them. There's the near referent pronoun, akanos.
Okay.
So the near, yeah, this and that. Yeah, those aren't relative, those are,
No, those are
demonstrative pronouns.
This and that.
Yeah, this and that, yeah.
Isn't there another
And there's altos, the same, and he, she, it.
pronoun?
That's a third. You got first person pronouns, second person, third person, but those are relative pronouns. Impersonal pronouns. You have personal pronouns, relative pronouns, demonstrative pronouns.
And the relative pronouns are the ones that look like articles.
Yes, they look like articles except they don't have the tau on.
Yeah.
And they function then normally in a relative clause as the beginning word or as the subject of the relative clause. Although they may be in the accusative, if the clause is functioning, let's say, as an accusative adjective, the relative pronoun that starts the clause will be an accusative because it tells you how it's functioning in the sentence and all those kind of things.
Okay. That helps. You have pronouns mixed up.
Yeah. Yeah, pronouns are a real challenge. Huh?
And how come that pronoun doesn't match the case of the one?
Yeah. And and the reason it doesn't match the case because you have a large multitude, okay, nominative, singular, palu, plethos, of people, tula'u, kai, women, of women. Okay, gunaikon. So the gunaikon is genitive because it is connected to plethos. Now, the who were beating the breasts, okay, does describe the women instead of the people and the women, okay? If it had been the people and the women, it would have been in the masculine. Because if you have multiple genders, both genders in a group, then the relative pronoun will always be in the masculine. So you can't tell from the masculine, but you know that here, the ones beating their breasts had to just be women. Okay?
Is that, why would they just be the only ones, would that just be the only appropriate thing? Would be
For them to do.
And so the men would be more stoic and...
Yeah. Most likely something like that. And, so, yeah. They were, beating their breasts and mourning. Also, in their culture, the women did the wailing and the weeping, not the men. So this would, in other words, they're mourning in advance of his crucifixion. And so what they're doing would be the kind of thing that you would find, when they talk about when Jesus went to raise, let's say, Jairus' daughter, the people who are wailing and all are women. That was sort of a women's role in the grieving process, I guess, would be a good way to think about it.
So at the tomb of Lazarus,
It'd be a bunch of women doing the wailing.
but Jesus did too.
No, Jesus wept. He didn't wail. And there's a difference. The wailing, well, the weeping is you're crying. The wailing was the big, loud, and the deep emotional outcry. In fact, they would even hire wailers to let everybody know just how serious it was or how sad they were.
If you watch the news and stuff, and you watch the Arab funeral processions, I guess that's supposed to be kind of what it was like.
Very similar.
Just the women are just, screaming and going nuts, and so
Yeah.
that's kind of how I was told.
Yeah, and the men are just there.
Yeah.
Same thing at a wedding. When the bride and groom arrive, it's the women who do all the shouting, not the men. So it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural, and this reflects that. So the high there, I think, takes us back to the subject. You've got the people following, and these women who are doing this. That would be my guess as to why it's
So that
not
was like
there.
a double subject then?
Yeah.
Okay.
But he goes on to call them daughters of Jerusalem.
And also, yeah, and here's the thing. Functionally, this relative clause is not functioning as an adjective. Okay, it's not functioning as an adjective, wailing women. It's functioning more epexegetical, describing the women. So it's not saying wailing and beating of the breast women. It's saying women, and these women are characterized by this. So that's why it also has the nominative, because it's really freestanding. It's really freestanding. And this high is functioning as the subject of the relative clause, not a connective to the other clause. That makes sense or not? And so it's a relative pronoun will have the case in which it's functioning. So here it's not functioning as a connective as much as it is as the subject of the clause. And the clause is epexegetical. It's describing the women, but it's not adjectival. That would be the difference. Okay.
Strophes de pros atas a Jesus Epen Bigateres Jerusalem me calete and plain f atas payete kai bi patekna unon.
Okay.
And Jesus turned toward them and said, Sisters of Jerusalem, do not cry for me, but weep for yourselves and your children.
All right. Okay, straw face. Parse that.
That is a looks like an infinitive, but it's an aorist. First person singular. Yes.
There's passive participle.
Aorist passive participle. That's the important thing. Yeah, it's a participle. Aorist passive participle. So after turning to them, see, the action has occurred prior to when Jesus says so. So after turning to them, Jesus says these things. And Thucateris, daughters of Jerusalem. Now notice the use of epi here. Do not weep, epi em. At this point, it would be inappropriate to say, don't weep on me. Stop getting your tears off me. And it's not the sense. But it's really the sense of what? Don't weep because of me. See, and there you see how epi as a preposition has a broader meaning than just on or upon. And so he uses that in that sense. In fact, he uses it several times. But for yourselves, weep. And for your children.
So yeah, don't weep on my behalf.
Right. Don't weep because of me, because worse is going to happen to y'all. That's really what he's saying there. Weep on your behalf.
Yeah,
Not because of you.
The plain, that
Mhm.
word right after.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize that one. But how would you describe it? I translated it however.
Or but. It's like Allah in a sense. It's the idea of a contrast.
Oh, okay.
Okay, next.
Hati Edu, Mercantai, Seminary, and Heis, Derickson, Makarii, Kai, Sterai, Kai, Clarii, Kai, Uk, Derickson, Kai, Mostoi, Hoyuk, Ethelson.
Good.
For behold, days come in which they will say, blessed are the barren, and the wombs which have not borne, and breasts which have not nursed.
Okay. Now, notice the articles with the different participles and how they're being used as adjectives, adjectival constructions here. Blessed are the barren and the wombs which, notice the use there of the relative pronoun. This time it matches because this relative clause is being used as an attributive adjective. The not giving birth wombs. The wombs which do not give birth or bear. Or which have not borne. You had that ageneson, the aorist idea, the wombs which should, and the mastoi, the breasts, which have not given, which do not feed or nourish the kids. Now, notice also, mastoi, which is masculine, Kolii, high, feminine. Reason being is mastoi is a masculine noun. Yeah, we always think of breasts in the feminine sense, but men have breasts too. It's just like the different parts of the face. Some are masculine, some are neuter, some are feminine. Remember that masculine and feminine is not sex. It's categories. It's gender. Generally, the feminine is used for female things, the masculine for male things, but not always. So masculine and feminine isn't male and female. But when you have a relative clause functioning adjectively, it matches up with the noun that it's being the adjective to, again, in case, gender, and number. So it's going to act just like an adjective. And that's the nice thing about relative pronouns, is that they have all three genders in all the cases. So you can do that. So that's always a consistent pattern. Okay, next verse.
Tote arxontai legain tois oresi. Pasete et hemas. Kai tois unois. Kalupsante hemas.
Kalupsate.
Or kalupsate hemas.
Yeah, okay, good.
Then they will begin to say to the mountains, fall upon us, and to the hills, cover us.
Good. Notice the imperative there. Second person plural imperative. Could also be, it's spelled the same way as an indicative, but we know that it's an imperative. Are they present imperatives or aorist imperatives?
Yeah, present.
Yeah, there's really one of each, isn't there? Now, sometimes a big deal is made about the present imperative means to continue doing something. The aorist imperative would mean to start doing something. Here you see this doesn't really work for that. Those distinctions can be there, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes an imperative is just an imperative, or it's an entreaty. But that rule isn't always the case. There's a tendency in that direction, but you have to be careful about building your theology off of what kind of imperative it is, for example, rather than the context. And here, clearly in the context, he has already said that they will begin to say. Now let's look at that construction too. You know, arxontai, to begin. Remember, that was one of our vocabulary words. Arko is to rule. Archomai is to begin.
So that's the, like legain,
That's right.
Infinitive.
Yeah, legain is the infinitive that completes the idea, because to begin doing what? To begin to say. So it's a common thing to have whenever you have to begin, archomai, you're almost always going to have an infinitive immediately after, which completes the idea. So that's normal. In your translating, you'll never even think about it. I mean, it just makes sense, because we do the same thing in English. You begin. You begin what? You begin to do, you begin to sleep, you begin to eat, you begin, we always need something that's after. Well, they did too.
What kind of infinitive is that? Is it just a...
It's just a plain old present infinitive.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Could you use that nuance of the present imperative in 28? Say, daughters of Jerusalem, stop weeping because of me, but continue weeping because of your children.
Very possibly you could. Yeah.
So don't change what you're doing, just change what you're doing.
Yeah. Don't change what you're doing, but change why you're doing it. Yeah. That would be using the nuances of the term. And in the context, it makes perfect sense. Because he's not telling them to stop weeping for their kids. Clearly, he wants them to continue weeping for their kids. And so he has that nuance.
But it wouldn't work in the mountains and the hills that they're...
Yeah. Keep falling on us. To the mountains, keep falling on us. And to the rocks, start falling on us. That doesn't make sense. So, and it's... And so this is a good spot to see the distinction between those. That context will guide you. It makes better sense, and in the context, then you can argue this is what would make sense for this or the significance of it. Okay, verse 31.
Oh. Hati e in to upago.
No?
Oh, hugro, sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Sulo tauta poi usin into zero te gnetai.
Okay?
And I want to say right now that I have no idea if this meant English, whatever.
Whether it's in English or Greek, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a proverbial statement.
Good.
That's what it is.
Okay, so basically he's saying, so if this is happening in the green trees, then what is it going to do in the trees that aren't green?
Yeah.
Well, become them. But I have no idea what that means. So it's really hard to smooth it out. So now you tell us.
Well, you know, he's talking about, you know, if they're going to kill me, what do you think they're going to do to my followers? You know, what do you think of your future? And it's really a comment on the attack on him and the situation that they're in. And really, I think the key is that the people around him are clueless as to the significance of what's happening. Even, you know, those women probably are the only ones who really understand, but they may not really understand. In fact, it indicates, because what he's told them, that they don't really understand what's coming ahead. They may be doing the wailing simply because it's somebody being crucified. They may not even really be wailing because it's him in particular.
So this is really pretty political of a statement.
Yeah.
Saying, you know, hey, you better take a look around. They're doing this to me.
Yeah. What's next?
Dun, dun, dun.
Because, you know, we always assume these women weeping and wailing were followers of Jesus. But here, at least here in Luke, he doesn't say that. He just says they're women of Jerusalem. You got this multitude who sees Jesus being carried off to be crucified. So it's likely, again, this is an interpretive issue, it's likely that they are really unaware of the significance of who he is.
So the weeping and wailing almost seems to be like it was often, you know, disingenuous. It was just a
It's a cultural thing.
Yeah. But it didn't. They may not necessarily have been moved by the person
Yeah.
or whatever.
Now, it could be, though, you know, that's one possibility, but it could be that in this instance, you know, I have to look more closely at all the different gospel accounts, that these women really are aware. And then the significance of what Jesus says is, yes, you understand the significance of me, but it's worse on you. And if they're going to do this to the green plant, think of what's going to happen to the rest. And so it becomes a strong warning to those who believe in him of the future that's about to come. That's probably a better interpretation of this. Unless you can find indicators elsewhere, you know, in the other Gospels that would indicate that these women were just simply wailing to wail. Generally, you wouldn't have that, you know, now argue for this interpretation. Generally, I would not think that you would have that because they always assume that the person being crucified deserved to die. And so you'd have the jeers rather than the wailing. So it's more likely these are women who are upset because they know who he is.
Because it was a big deal to be for him, wasn't it? I mean, to be on his side.
It was risky.
Yeah,
You didn't just do it. Yeah, you didn't do it openly.
So I have a question.
Huh?
Who's gonna begin to say the mountains fall on us, into the hillsides? Or if they do this to the green tree, what do you think they're gonna do with it?
I think he's talking about
the
the city of Jerusalem as a group. In other words, it's an allusion to judgment coming.
AD 70?
I think so. I I think he's talking about the judgment. And that's why when Peter then preaches his sermon in Acts chapter 2, he tells the people to be delivered, repent and be baptized, and be saved/delivered from this evil generation. And I think what Peter was really talking about was not get justified, but he's saying to justified saints who come to Jerusalem to worship, you need to identify yourself now with Christ and not with the nation of Israel, because this generation of Israel is about to be judged by God. And if you want to deliver yourself out of that judgment, believe and be baptized and identify yourself with Christ. And so he was talking a different kind of salvation. He wasn't talking about if you want to go to heaven. He's talking about if you want to avoid the wrath of God that's about to be poured out on this nation. That was his sermon. And that's one of my theories in terms of how to interpret that.
Is this one of those things where it could be like the prophecies where you have the near fulfillment, and also talks about the far fulfillment?
Yeah, because these same things are going to be said when? During the Great Tribulation. When the wrath of God is poured out on all of mankind. Same kind of things are said. So yeah, there'd be the near fulfillment, 70 AD, the future fulfillment, or the multiple fulfillment.
But you think this one actually was that?
Yeah, I think this one he's really talking 70 AD.
And so it's not. This one isn't necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't talking, I don't think this is an allusion or a prophecy about the second coming. I think this is talking about the judgment that the nation faces because of what they're doing to him. Because he's telling these ones, your children are going to suffer. Not your great-great-great-great-great-grandkids, but your kids are going to suffer.
Do you have one of those sermons for the United States?
Yeah, I don't think he does, and that's where I think it's a mistake, by the way, for preachers to take this and apply it to the U.S. Now, what you can do though is you can go by principle, and you can say, seeing the warning that Jesus gave to them because of the rejection of him, when our nation rejects him, it faces a similar kind of judgment, because that seems to be the pattern. We can go through Scripture and see how God has judged nations, not just Israel, but other nations when they have rejected his truth. And so you begin, if you're going to preach something like that, you preach it on the basis of the pattern of God's character and dealings in the past, and say, because he's done it this way, we can anticipate the same thing for us if we don't repent. But it doesn't carry the weight of thus saith the Lord. It would only carry the weight of, I'm worried.
This did the Lord.
Yeah, thus did the Lord, and he's pretty consistent. So. Okay, next.
32.
Yes.
Higanta de kai hekavoy kakurgoy dro sun auto anai senai. This was a hard one because if you translated it one way, it made Christ seem like a criminal that he wasn't. But I said, and led away with him were two others, pause, criminals, to be put to death. Otherwise, if you say, and also they were led two other criminals with him to be put to death.
Let's deal with that, because you got heteroi, got kurgoi, okay, duo. How do we handle this?
It kind of gives a little bit of illustration to that, why the women were crying, if, like what you say, they knew he wasn't a criminal. There were a lot of people that knew he wasn't. I think the whole nation knew.
Yeah. Now, here's the way to handle this. Notice he used heteros, not allos. What's the significance of the nuance? Now, again, heteros and allos are synonyms. There are places where they're used interchangeably. But sometimes they're nuanced contrastives.
Others of a different kind.
That's right. Others of a different kind is heteros. Allos is others of the same kind, when it's nuanced. So here, the context would indicate it has the nuanced sense.
Others are different kind.
Yeah. So in other words, two other criminals who are different from him in that they were evildoers.
And then a lot of that is made up of addiction.
That's right.
That would have been paused or
That's right.
addiction of it.
That's right.
The Deikai, is that usually an and also thing?
Yeah. Or but also, and also, yeah. So also there were two other criminals who were different from him. Two others of a different kind. So he's classing them as separate. They were evildoers. They were criminals in contrast to him.
So we'd say something like two other men who were criminals or something.
Yeah. Yeah. There were two other men with him who happened to be criminals who were being crucified. And the key there is the nuanced sense of heteros. Heteros. His choice of that. If he'd used allos, he would have been saying Jesus was a criminal too. Now, where that often will be interchangeable is, for example, in there are sometimes lists that go back and forth between the two, and it's clear that it's just a synonym. But then, in other instances, there are those nuanced meanings. For example, in the spiritual gifts list, when it goes through the list to another, he gave this to another. There he uses allos and heteros interchangeably. But when he goes through and says, first there are apostles and then prophets and then this and others and others and others, there he makes a clear distinction that there are differences. So you pay, again, attention to the context, and it helps you discern those things. Okay? Next verse.
Kai hata elthon epiton tapon ton kalumenon chronia. Ege estarosa auton kai tus carcubus on men ec dexion.
Hanmen.
Sorry.
Yeah.
On men ec dexion on de ex aristilum.
Good.
Aristilum.
Yes.
And when they came to the place called Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right and one on the left.
Good. Very good. And notice you got the men deconstruction. On one hand, you had one on the left, one on the right. On the other hand, you had one on the left. Or you could say one on the right, one on the left. We would say in English. Or in English, we'd say one on each side. And,
The Han men?
the Han there is,
Is it a relative pronoun?
no, it's not a relative pronoun, it's what?
One.
One, with the number one.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Because it works kind of without,
Yeah,
because when you get the men dead, it's on.
that's right.
Yeah, they speak. Okay. It's your turn, Dan. Your Civil War.
34. Don't have to sound it out now, let's translate.
Okay. But Jesus was saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they divided his garment into 12 models.
Okay. Now, notice that there at the end, and they divided his garments. Dia meridzomenoi. It's a participle. Yeah, it's a present participle.
Dividing his garments.
While dividing his garments, yeah, they cast lots. So the real subject is contained in the verb And the participle, again, is a temporal participle telling you something that they were doing. In other words, while they, in the process of dividing his garments amongst themselves, they were casting lots. So there you have, and the key there is it doesn't have an article. It doesn't have an article. It's telling you when. It's related to the main verb, time-wise. And being a present participle, the action of dividing the garments is happening at the same time as the casting of the lots. Okay. And notice with elegant, Jesus was saying. So he's using, notice that Luke is using imperfects to tell a story. He's using imperfects. Mark uses present tense. Present tense. And Mark loves to use utus immediately. And immediately he's doing this. And immediately next he's doing this. So Mark's keeping you going. But Luke, we see this pattern developing. Okay, next.
And the people had stood watching. And the rulers also ridiculed, saying, he saved others, let him save himself. This one is the Christ, the chosen one of God.
Okay. Good.
Can we talk about that?
Yes. We can. What do you want to know about it?
How are they usually translated again?
A pluperfect is normally translated in English with had done something. A pluperfect is completed action in the past with results that continued in the past but are not especially continuing in the present. Unlike a perfect, which has completed action in the past with results that continue to the present.
So
That would be the difference.
have been standing for us.
Right.
That's why they have participle, or they wrote, and the people had stood.
And while they were standing there, they were beholding while they were beholding. They stood there while they were watching. Yes, Mark.
How do you know at the end of that verse, just translate the first time I put the Christ of God, the chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Bible says, Christ, the chosen one of God.
Well, God's the Messiah, the chosen one, right?
How do you know which one to put it with?
I would,
Is word order here one of the places where you're...
no, it's more like what makes sense, what makes smoother English,
Okay.
because ha electos is an adjective, right? Functioning as an attributive adjective, so we would think of it as the elect Messiah, the elect anointed one.
Right.
So the chosen Christ of God.
Yeah, so it'd be the chosen Christ of God, is how we would normally translate it.
Okay.
Or one option you could do diagrammatically would be to make the elect one exegetical. He is the Christ of God, who is elect,
That's
who is the elect one.
Yeah.
In other words,
Could you say the Christ is chosen by God?
no, you wouldn't be able to do that because the by God would have been dative. The by God would have been in the dative. Most likely.
It doesn't change the meaning much here, but you
No.
just wonder if you run into that in a more critical verse.
No,
Imagine,
I can't think of any where that becomes significant.
Okay.
It doesn't affect any theology or anything like that. Okay, next.
The soldiers also mocking him, coming and offering him wine vinegar and saying, if you are my king, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself.
Okay, good. the nominative case subject and got that in there. Very good.
Get a lot of participles.
Yep, lots of participles. Yeah, how about this pros ergonomoi? What role is it playing in the sentence? It's right after stratiotai. So is it the attributive adjective? Is it functioning as an attributive adjective with stratiotai? And the answer is it can't be for a reason. Hoi stratiotai. Stratiotai has the article. Prosercomenoi does not have the article. You go, well, it's got hoi. But you see, stratiotai is also masculine, nominative, plural. It just happens to be a first person, not first person, first declension noun. So prosercomenoi is an arthrus. So it's telling you when. It's relative to the main verb, and it paixan. They were reviling him, or ridiculing him. Okay? So, but also the soldiers were ridiculing him while approaching him. And what are they doing while approaching him? Oxos, giving sour wine to him. So in other words, these guys are saying this while they're walking up to him with the sour wine.
The sour wine, was that the kind of pain medicine kind, or was that just bad wine?
It was based on the other gospels. It was the pain medicine kind that had drugs in it to ease the pain and extend the misery.
Oh, okay.
In other words, its purpose was to keep someone from going into shock and dying too soon. And it did it by numbing them just enough to keep them from going into shock. Yeah, there was nothing merciful about it.
That's gentle.
Yeah. Yeah, if you haven't studied crucifixion, to understand what they did to Jesus, you should read some of the articles on crucifixion. For example, what you don't see in the movies is that a common practice was they drove a nail in the cross where the guy's crotch would be, so that he couldn't sit down. I mean, if he let go, if he relaxed his arms, he sat on a nail. So that forced him to constantly pull himself up to avoid sitting on a nail sticking out of the thing. And of course, then when he's too exhausted to hold himself up, and he's getting relief from his arms, he's getting jabbed up the rear. I mean, they thought of everything. You know, they drove a nail through the feet so that to push up, to breathe, caused pain in the feet. There was nothing you could do that didn't induce pain some way or another. And the thing is, there were sometimes people that lived for a long time, like several days. Now, sometimes they didn't do some of those things. Sometimes they just tied you up and let you die from exposure. And there was one guy who was famous for lasting 3 weeks. He didn't die, and he became a tourist attraction. People started bringing him food and stuff like that. So then they finally got tired of him, broke his legs, and finished him off. But generally, a person could actually go for several days, and they would basically die from exposure and agony or blood loss and things like that. Jesus' death was unusually fast because these guys were masters at extending suffering as long as possible. It was true torture.
Did they use crucifixion in other parts of the Roman Empire then?
Yes. They used it throughout the Roman Empire, but never for Roman citizens. No Roman citizen could be crucified, which is why Paul had his head chopped off. They executed Roman citizens by beheading them.
What about John? Is that why? Was he a Roman citizen?
No, John wasn't, but he also didn't get, he's the only one who wasn't martyred. That's why Peter was crucified.
No, I meant John the Baptist.
Oh, John the Baptist? No. He wasn't a Roman citizen, but he got beheaded because the daughter of Herod, or Herod's stepdaughter, asked for his head on a platter, so that went to.
You were going to chance him to say more things on the cross.
Right, yeah. And so, yeah, so John the Baptist, he was beheaded because she asked for his head. Otherwise, the common execution would have been not crucifixion. Herod the Great couldn't do that because he wasn't Roman. He would have had to hand John the Baptist over to some kind of Roman officials, but he would have probably had him stoned. Yeah, he would have more likely had him stoned because that was the Jewish method. Either stoning or run through with a sword or spear or something like that. Or hung in the sense of hanging on a noose.
So Herod was not connected to Rome at all?
No, he was a puppet king. He was considered Judean, in fact, by the Romans, although his mother was a Jewess and his father was an Edomite. And so he was one of the things that the Romans did for government control was in a country where you could have a king from the locals, if they could have a local government, they did. And they would appoint someone king, let's say, like they did Herod the Great, and then give him a Roman army to back him up. And then he would set up his kingdom, but he really worked for them. And then he'd set up his own government from the local people. And they all benefited from it, so they would support the government because they were getting rich off the deal. Now, if he as king couldn't maintain control like Archelaus failed to do, his son, later, Herod the Great's son, who did inherit the kingdom, lost the kingdom after only about 6 years because of his poor rule. Then they would replace him with a Roman governor, who then would work through a local government, in this case the Sanhedrin, to maintain Roman control. So, like Pilate worked primarily through the Sanhedrin. He had his own troops to back him up, but he worked primarily through the Sanhedrin and through Jewish tax collectors to control the people. And then it all came through him as the Roman representative.
So Herod would have been a Jew.
The Romans would have considered him a Jew. The Jews didn't because of his father. But he was considered a local king, a subject king.
And he would he
Vassal
be
king.
familiar with like Old Testament writings?
Herod was a classic, what we think of as a classic Greek. He worshipped the Greek gods. He worshipped Yahweh. He worshipped anything and everything that lived. So he was very Hellenized. But he built the temple and he did a lot of things for the Jews to try to ingratiate himself to them. But he was not a believer. He just did it because it was the politically correct thing to do. The expedient thing to do in order to maintain some kind of a relationship with the people and to maintain his control. On the flip side, he built the temple and he slaughtered lots of them. Whatever it took to maintain control. And then he did anything the Romans wanted. In fact, he was the perfect puppet king because no matter which Roman general won the battle to become the next Caesar, Herod was loyal to him. He was loyal to whoever was Caesar, he didn't care who. And in the meantime, if y'all want to fight it out like between Mark Antony and Caesar Augustus, was it Caesar Augustus? Who was the two that was fighting? It wasn't Julius Caesar. Whoever Octavian. Anyhow, during that civil war in which Cleopatra eventually committed suicide, Herod played both sides. He was loyal to both and to neither. He played it so well that whoever won, he came out on top. He was very, very shrewd. And in fact, both sides understood that, and they appreciated him for that because they didn't have to worry about Judea while they were fighting each other. They knew that whichever one of us wins, Judea will be loyal. And so that's the kind of person Herod was. Okay, where are we at? I think it's Robert's turn, right?
Yeah.
38. Oh, yeah, actually, we didn't talk about some of the grammar here. Let's hit that. Notice what they say. If you are the king of the Jews, then save yourself. The use of the reflexive, altan, save yourself, sosan, the command. But if you are the king of the Jews. A, subject A. Which one is if and which one is you are?
You are the second one.
Yeah, you are is the second one. And the first one is an if. So is this a first class, second class, or third class conditional sentence?
First class.
It's either first or second class.
Well, second.
First class is A plus the indicative. Got A, me. Second class would be A plus the indicative in the protasis, and in the apodosis, you have the on. We don't have on in this sentence. So this is the first class. They're saying, since you're the king of the Jews, come on down and save yourself.
Oh, I see.
See the ridicule, the mocking going on here. So this if assumes to be true. So he's not getting any sympathy from his crucifiers. And that comes out in what they're in what they say and how they say it. Okay, verse 38.
Okay.
I said 2 in a row.
Yeah, he did 2 in a row, so he's messed y'all up, see? Yeah, he did. Well, it just wasn't a good enough sentence to stop off. Yeah, he did a whole sentence, which is good.
Well, okay.
Well, I am doing 38, right?
Yeah, you're doing 38.
This was a little weird, and there was also an inscription on it, and I guess we're just supposed to notice the cross.
Yeah,
This is the King of the Jews.
good.
On the inscription,
Uh-huh.
would we expect that would be the direct? Of course, actually, we know from when it was in 3 languages, right? Was there another gospel where it says it was in 3 languages?
Yes.
With,
A couple of the other Gospels say that. Mark and Matthew both say that.
But is it reasonable to expect this is the exact way it was assigned, or would they not necessarily have that been referred to?
Yeah, I think if we compare the Gospels, I think they all quoted the same. So this is what would have been in Greek. It was in
Right.
Greek, Latin, and Hebrew.
How prevalent was Latin then?
It was not the lingua franca, of course Greek was, but it would be on official Roman documents because actually Romans spoke Latin and Greek. So Pilate, in dealing with the Jews, would have spoken to them in Greek, but dealing with the soldiers, he would have spoken in Latin.
So did Latin influence Greek, or did Greek influence Latin? Because they're similar.
Yeah, well, they're sister languages. So they both have a earlier origin of another language. So they both grew out of probably a similar language. I can't remember for sure if that's the case, but I think they are.
I like to say the Greek came first.
Why?
Yeah, probably did. Yeah, the Greeks were around before the Romans were around.
Over time.
Yeah.
Over time.
Can the F alto be over him?
What's that? The het alto?
Over him? Over.
Yeah, ep alto. Yeah, and in other words, upon him instead of upon it. Yeah, because there's no, you go back to the alto, you ask, okay, what is its antecedent?
Right.
And it's easier to see the antecedent as Jesus, because they said, save yourself. And you have the alto earlier, they were at the end of verse 36. And you keep falling the altos back and they go back to Christ. So it'd be easier. And so there, now, epi, you went with upon it because it doesn't make sense upon him. But here's where epi has more than the sense of on or upon. It's going to be broader, in this case, over him. It's still connected to him in the sense that it's not on one of the other guys.
Well, that makes more sense.
crosses with an arrow saying that one's it. Yeah. And so yeah, and there again, you've learned the basic meaning of the prepositions, but sometimes you'll come to a place where that basic meaning doesn't make sense. And if you look in Bauer, Art, and Gingrich, you find it's got a broader list of possible meanings, and one of those others then makes better sense. Okay, verse 39.
Okay, now. And one of the criminals hanging insulted him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." Wasn't sure whether hanging there, or one of the hanging criminals, if you could say that.
Yeah.
Aorist participle.
Yeah,
So, aorist participle indicates
Being hanged.
he had been hanged.
so. Oh, one of the criminals.
Who had been hanged along with him.
So hanging there at the same time, because he's given the
Yeah,
time events.
that's right.
Kind of said,
And notice the use of uki here.
Spooky.
They even underlined it to draw your attention to it. He's asking a question. Are you not the Christ? And the expected answer is?
No.
Y'all know the rule of MNOP, right? Did we talk about that?
Yep.
Yeah. So he expects a positive answer. Yes, I am the Christ. M, nay, expects a negative answer. No. U expects a positive answer. So he's saying, aren't you the Christ? Of course you are. Then save yourself and us. So this guy's, but notice we're told he's blaspheming him. So he's saying it
Kind of like the soldiers.
like the soldiers. He's not sincere. See, so contextually we're told this is blasphemy because he's not sincere. This isn't genuine. But, verse 40.
Yeah, they're rebuking him and said, I don't get, this is difficult to me, this question. So basically he says, do not fear God, because is it in him judgment is, or do not fear him because he's the one that's judging you, or is it same, you have the same judgment? How do you know it's different? Which one's which?
Let's ask that question. How do we know this auto here is the same instead of in him?
So it would make sense, I think, both ways, wouldn't it? Because in God is judgment. You
And
don't
the answer,
fear.
yeah, you're right. But the answer is this. Chromanti is dative. So, in can also mean by. Be translated by. Okay? Still doesn't make sense yet? By the same judgment. And remember, auto, okay, or this is autos, from autos, when it's in the attributive adjective position, it means the same. It's translated as the same. When it's in the predicate adjective position, we translate it he, she, it. Y'all remember that? Some do, some don't.
I remember trying to learn that in High Western.
Right. And going nuts over it. Yeah, this is a hard one because, okay, which rule is it now? I struggled with this, trying to figure it out for years. So, yeah. So, in other words, by the same judgment, because you are basically saying, don't you fear God because you're experiencing the same judgment as this guy. And of course, he's going to tell more here, verse 41.
And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward for what we did, but he did nothing wrong.
Good.
What's improximum? What is that for eproxo? Or, yeah.
It's from prasso, to do or perform.
Oh, no, I can figure that out. Okay.
And so, in fact, this is a good one. It's from prasso. It has 2 sigmas, but it only has 1 in its stem. And so you have the sigma combined with the sigma becomes a C in the aorist, or future. In this case, it's the aorist because it was a sigma alpha connected to it. And you have the augment on the front. So you go, this is an aorist. And this is one of those good examples of when you're combining with those sigmas that's in the stem that has a sigma at the end of it, and what it does to you.
So the Kai Hemes men, the Kaios,
Yes.
why did he translate the way he did? Because you have the Kai,
And we, on the one hand, justly.
So, I mean, I can understand what it's trying to say, but how do we get to the point where...
Well, there's an understood. We, on the one hand, are justly being crucified. He's left out the verb. Is what he's done. There's an understood verb, being crucified, or being punished. Because he said that, don't you, we're in the same judgment, criminality, so there's this understood thing there.
So would that be on the one hand, or would that be indeed?
I would go with indeed.
Because
There's no men dead construction, so there's no on one hand and on the other. So you would go with the indeed concept. We certainly deserve it. So verse 42.
And he was saying, Jesus, remember me when you may come into your kingdom.
Go ahead and do the next one.
And he said to him, truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise.
Okay.
And go ahead.
Now let's talk about the significance of this. The grammar here is pretty straightforward. Did you notice hatan elthes, when you should come? Here's where the subjunctive, you translate it when you might come. I would translate it when you should come, because the hata there requires a subjunctive, but it doesn't especially require it to be just a possibility. It's, in other words, he's saying, you are, he's still affirming that you're going to come into your kingdom. Now, okay, and here's the interesting thing about this. When I look at this, and this is an interpretive thing, I think this man clearly affirmed that you are the Messiah and you're going to resurrect and come into your kingdom.
Should is kind of must.
Yeah. In other words, it's a future expectation more than something that's presently experienced. And my own feeling is he said this to comfort Jesus. To be a contrast to the guy next to him. I don't think he was asking Jesus to justify him. He had already said, I deserve the punishment I'm getting. Here's getting my just desserts. This guy doesn't deserve it. And my own feel of this whole conversation is that he really turns to Jesus and says, I just want you to know that somebody is mockers. The soldiers have been mocking him, the rulers are mocking him, this fellow thief is mocking him. So he says, Jesus, I just want you to know somebody believes in me. And that was enough faith to justify. Because Jesus says, okay, well, you'll be with me today in paradise. Jesus declared him a justified saint. And he was probably the first New Testament saint in the sense that he died soon after Jesus did and was cleansed by the blood of Christ. Because paradise, theologically, in first century times, paradise was identified with the good side of hell. Hell had 2 compartments, the store of Lazarus and the rich man, paradise and torment, or the bosom of Abraham was another name for paradise. So when Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise, what this guy would have understood from him is you're going to die, but you're going to the place of the righteous, not the place of the wicked. That you will go to the place of rest, where you await God's reward, not the place of punishment, torment, where you await His punishment. And so Jesus is really, we know that this thief on the cross was a believer, or was justified by Christ.
So you said paradise is a different thing than heaven?
Yes. Paradise is different from heaven, and in fact now paradise is empty. It was filled with the righteous until Jesus died for their sins. They still couldn't go to heaven until Jesus died for their sins. And in Ephesians it talks about how He had descended and then He ascended and He took captivity captive. And I believe that what Paul's talking about there is that after His death, Jesus went to paradise, and after ascending to heaven and presenting Himself and being accepted by the Father, He then emptied paradise. And that's why Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, now to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Up until then, to be absent from the body was to be in paradise, awaiting the presence of the Lord. But now, we don't go to paradise, we go into God's presence in heaven.
Do you think that in time now there's people in heaven?
Yes. Yeah, the spirits of the redeemed from all time, beginning with Adam, are in heaven right now in God's presence.
Because that's what I tend to think.
Now, their bodies aren't.
Yeah.
Now, there's some discussion as to, okay, what kind of body do they have? You know, is there some intermediate body, some intermediate existence? Because there's clear indications that, you know, Moses and Elijah met with Jesus, they had bodies. And Elijah met with Saul, and he had a body. So there's some kind of corporeal existence that is identifiable. We don't know what its nature is. But we also do know clearly in Scripture that a day is coming, though, when their physical body will be reunited with that spiritual body in the resurrection, rapture of the church, and all that. And at that time, then, we will always be with Christ. But Paul says clearly in 2 Corinthians 5 that right now, when I become absent from my body, I am consciously present with the Lord. And I am clothed with a heavenly body.
Dr. D, what did you mean, unless I heard you wrong, you said He was the first New Testament saint, is that what you said?
Yeah, well, he was the first person saved after the death of Jesus. In the sense that...
If he died after.
Right, if he died after. In other words, he's the first person chronologically who died with Jesus having already died for his sins. Everybody up till then, Jesus was still waiting for Jesus to die for their sins. So he's the first one, or pretty close. There may have been some other saints that died in the few minutes between, scattered around the world. But those that we know of, he's the first one who died having had Jesus already die for his sins and not having to wait for it. Being able to benefit immediately at death.
And for those that see faith as to work, then that little passage there has got to be a little bit of a, it at least lowers the whole common denominator of what we really have to do.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, and it also is going to have some problems with some other passages that are more in depth about what belief you need to have.
That's right. Yeah, and I think that what Scripture teaches, for example, John 3:14 and 15. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so too the Son of Man will be lifted up, that all who believe in him will not perish but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And in the wilderness experience, it wasn't how much faith you had. It was simply anyone who looked at the serpent got healed. And so all it takes is the look of faith to Jesus. I mean, that's what Jesus is saying there. Whoever believes. Doesn't say how much they believe, how accurately or whatever. Those who believe in him, or how theologically correct they are, or how much they know. Now, I do believe you have to believe in the right Jesus. The Mormons are not believing in the same Jesus. They're not saved because the name Jesus isn't what saves. Jehovah's Witnesses aren't. It has to be the right Jesus. but it doesn't have to be like some theologians try to say there's different levels of faith or different grades of faith. And I've read many who say that there are people who have faith in Jesus, but it's spurious faith. It's incomplete faith. Even though they've trusted in Him as their Savior, and they believe that He's heard their prayer, and all those kinds of things, they're not really saved because they weren't elect. And that there are some guys who actually say that the non-elect can have faith in Jesus as their Savior, but it won't do them any good because they're not elect. And I think, well, yeah, and that's the opposite of what the Bible teaches. But it's logical when you take the doctrine of election to its logical extremes. And,
Well, that passage, you could see someone arguing who says faith is a work. Well, it's a very, very little work.
yeah,
But actually, it seems to actually argue that with faith being the gift, look how little is necessary to exemplify the gift having
That's
been
right.
given.
yeah. But it doesn't take hardly anything. In fact, that's adequate fruit. Okay, let's go ahead and take a pause.